everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Black Women's Wellness Podcast. My name is DeJa Love, and this is a podcast where we amplify Black women's voices as we discuss how we manage stress and maintain our well-being. We want to ensure that all Black women live productive, meaningful, and robust lives unhinged by stress. We are excited that you tuned in to this episode wherever you're watching it from, if it's on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We're happy you're here. Sit back, relax, and let's get into today's episode. I'm really excited for this topic as we really discuss Black yoga teachers and specifically Black women who are in yoga and who really challenge the stereotype of what yoga is. So I am joined by a wonderful guest today. We're here with Abiola. I paused because I don't want to mispronounce your name. I want to hold space. So Abiola, please tell us who you are.
Abiola Ogunbekun, but you can always call me Abby too. Abby is great as well.
Thank you, Abiola. I appreciate your grace there. and it's funny, y'all. We practiced this before we started, and I did it fine. But then I'm like, oh.
It's just stage fright.
Yeah. So I appreciate you. Before we get into our episode, I always love to start with our guests. And Abiola, I want to hear from you. How do you maintain your own wellness and balance amidst the many demands of relationships and life and work, and then your practice of yoga? What keeps you grounded?
Honestly, it's something that I'm continually having to check in on and rebalance all aspects of wellness. So not just physical, but mental, emotional, and spiritual, like all four aspects of wellness. The calibrating never really stops, I'm realizing. I think I was so long trying to get to a place where it's like, okay, and now we're stable. But really, once you kind of hit that symmetry, something does kind of like get a little off balance, maybe not right away, but it does get off balance. And then you have to recalibrate again. Physically, I've really had to learn the lesson of listening to my body. And while pushing through the plateaus, whether it's energy plateaus, weight loss plateaus, you name it, even though pushing through those plateaus has their place, so does rest and resetting. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like internal wellness, it's about constantly checking in with myself, making sure that I journal as well. I notice when I don't journal, I feel like I kind of have like a blockage of emotions because when I journal, it helps me to process through my thoughts a little bit more thoroughly, so then I have a more clear understanding of what it is that I'm feeling. And then it's about honoring those needs as well. Mm-hmm. So it could be a season of like not reaching out / pouring out as much to protect my own wellspring, which has kind of been where I am right now. You know, I'm always the one to like kind of reach out to friends, reach out to people, and at least for the most part. And I realized I needed to sit back and not be so scared that people wouldn't reach out to me, because you know, when you're pouring out so much, you start to realize that nothing's coming back in. Mm-hmm. So reevaluating boundaries is another thing that I'm having to do, and just kind of like preparing / having the hard conversations to protect those two things, protect my wellspring and my boundaries if necessary. So that's kind of how I'm balancing right now.
Mm. Oh, wow. That's really helpful. And the point that you mentioned of discerning when you need to hold space for you and not pour so much into others. How do you know when to do that? When, you know, because I think that's the hard part for a lot of us Black women that are ambitious. How do you know when to do that?
I think it's a combination of things. I know one definite aspect is the fact that I have become all too familiar with the symptoms of burnout. And so, even though it's been very hard times when I've experienced burnout, I'm thankful because I am somebody who can learn a lesson very quickly when it comes to things like that in terms of avoiding them. So I can recognize the onset of burnout a lot more clearly than when I first experienced it in my life. So that's one thing, is just honoring my instinct and my remembrance of those signs. And then just kind of tying into my own spirituality, I identify as a Jesus follower. So Christ is very important to me. And I truly lean on the Holy Spirit to really help guide me. I mean, really not even help guide me, for me to just rely on their guidance and not lean on my own understanding. And part of that is just following the peace of Jesus Christ. And I know that God doesn't operate from a place of guilt, shame, hurrying, none of that. So if I feel like I have to do something, like if I feel guilted into doing something, if I feel, anything other than love, peace, joy, the fruits of the Spirit, then I know that God's not in that. And if God's not in that, I'm not going to force myself to be in that. So whether or not it's like a straight up pump the brakes, like I'm out, or if it's something I have to step back from gradually, I try to honor that. That's kind of how I try to keep that balance, is because it's not really on my own understanding.
Right. Oh, that's wonderful. I love that that's your center, your foundation, your North Star, your faith. And I appreciate that. I can appreciate that. And I think it's really interesting, your background, as we'll talk more about your journey into yoga and what led you there. I'm going to put a pin in that piece, because I think sometimes for a lot of, as you said, you're a Jesus follower. So many Jesus followers feel challenged with the practice of yoga because a lot of people think that it's a religious approach. You'll talk more about that, but I want to hear more about your journey, your origin story. What led you down this path, and as you connect your faith and helping you be as your anchor, what brought you into the practice of yoga specifically? And I think I highlight that during this time that we're in, post 2020, where we've seen this surge of Black women yoga teachers on social, and we're just seeing it in a way that we've never really seen before. They've always been there, but it hasn't been amplified. So that's really framing today's episode and conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it started back in 2013, really. I kind of started realizing like, hey, I'm about to turn 25. If I don't get a handle on my health, then it is going to go badly for me for the next quarter century of my life. I don't even remember how much exactly. I could have been anywhere between 3 to 320 pounds. So January of 2013, I changed my eating habits. I cut out dairy and I started trying to eat a little bit more balanced and cut out things that were, not necessarily nutrition dense. And then in July of 2013, I decided to try something. I had read an article that said it actually takes 60 days to make a habit, not 30. And that's why the bulk of New Year's resolutions fail, because people will do them all through January. But then as soon as like February hits, first or second week, people were like, okay, well, I'll take a pause, but I'll just come right back to it. But that habit hasn't really sunk in yet. So because of that, a lot of those resolutions fail. So using that science, I was like, all right, I'm going to try to work out 2 to 3 times a week, every week for 60 days. And up till this point, like I did not exercise. I actively tried not to sweat because the time of the month, like I let myself straighten my hair once a month back then. And when I would straighten my hair, it's like, I'm not trying to get sweaty. No, thank you. So, this was like a big thing for me. But also, again, I just turned 25 on July 4th. So I was like, my knees already hurt to walk up a flight of stairs. This is not going to go well if I don't change something. So I started working out, and I started with yoga and Pilates, and it was literally like a 10-minute clip of yoga and a 10-minute clip of Pilates that I found online. Couldn't even get through them both. I could barely get through the yoga one. I remember when I finally was able to make it through 10 minutes of yoga, like I felt like a boss. And then I would do the Pilates one. And then when I could finally do the Pilates and the yoga, like 20 whole minutes of activity, I was just like, oh my gosh, I can possibly do this. And like the changes that happened in those 2 months, like were huge. So I kept it going. I was like, okay, well, let's try for 3 months in a row. Let's try for 6 months. And then 6 months turned into a year turned into 2 years, 2 years turned into 5. And as of this past July, I hit 9 years of working out at least 3 times a week, every week for the past 9 years straight. Even when I've been sick, when I've had my period, when I've had all sorts of things, when I've been busy AF, I kept it going. And it started with a mixture of things, but yoga was in it, and yoga stayed part of it. I basically wanted to be a teacher after my first class at the B Yoga Studio, a studio here in Charlotte, North Carolina, that I found February 2014. I remember just like having just the kindest teacher. Her name was Stephanie. And I was like, I would love to be a yoga teacher. But then just, doing a little research, it's like, yeah, that's not going to be possible for a really long time. Plus, you just started really getting exercise into your life. Like you got to get somewhere first. You got to practice for a while. So, I stayed at B Yoga for pretty much my entire yoga practice. Even, sometimes I'd fall out of practice. Sometimes I'd fall back in, especially when I started weight training more intensively. I realized yoga needed to balance. But I remembered, 2020, everything shut down. I think at one point, like I was trying to do yoga like through like YouTube clips or things like that, or like Instagram, but wasn't really finding anything that connected. And I actually became a beneficiary of like those 2020 / post 2020 changes in the yoga community, because I received one of the first BIPOC scholarships offered through Core Power Yoga, which is like a yoga conglomerate of sorts based in Denver, I believe. And because of that, like a 7-year dream came true for me in 2020.
Wow. You said a lot there. Wow.
Sorry.
No, it's wonderful. That's your origin story, and that's just a component. And I that's just amazing. One, I have to hold space. I appreciate you being so vulnerable with sharing your journey of that. It's, we're not at all fixated on weight here. It's not about that. I mean, we're talking about joyful movement and what really gives you life. And huge congratulations, 9 years. That's amazing, Abiola. I don't want to make it
a decade.
Yes, like that's huge. That is amazing. This is a lifestyle. This isn't just for a goal, but this is your life journey. You want to be able to move with intentionality. And it's amazing. There's so many things to that point. I think hearing your story of where you started that first year to where you are here at almost a decade of employing this, I think there are many Black women out there that will really resonate with that will really resonate with your desire and your intensity to say, I have to make a change. And specific as you talk about you into yoga as also weight training, but can you share a little bit about once you're a recipient of funding in 2020, the BIPOC scholarships, is a lot of the white organizations in yoga really offered funding. But how did you work with your own self-talk? When you think about a yoga teacher, we have been fed a lie that it's in one way, that it's a stereotype, it's a caricature. How did you work on saying, no, I have space here? People need to see someone like me representing an inclusive approach to yoga. What went into that process of the unlearning and relearning as you're on this journey?
I mean, that's a really complex question. And I would say, like, it's definitely, like, if I had to give it like a status, I would definitely say it's like still in progress. Mm. Even though getting a BIPOC scholarship and getting my RYT 200 training for free, even though that has been a blessing, I definitely have gone from the challenge of finding teachers I can relate with on a physical level to endeavoring to be a teacher who is relatable to her class. Because it's not just a physical sense of relatability. It goes further, I think, than skin color and melanin. It goes to how inclusive and welcoming I choose to make my class and make my own little corner of this yoga community. And so I really I choose to just try to welcome all who come across any of my classes, any of my media, however they look, however they relate. That in itself does have a cost, but it is something that I remember thinking in my classes, sometimes I'd have a really great teacher. And then sometimes I have a teacher where it felt like if I was not this little bendy size 0 woman, like there's no way in hell I could even do half of this class, let alone all of it. And so for me, it's not just about the flash of asanas that are really rooted in South Asian Indian culture for hundreds and, almost thousands of years that has nothing to do with very nimble, bendy, dancer-like yogis. But at the same time, it's about trying to endeavor to make like an environment that feels inclusive as possible, where everyone feels like they can be themselves, whether or not they are a Black woman, a brown woman, a white woman, a gay man, whoever, a cisgender person or a transgender person. Like my son culpa, if you will, like my reason to be as a yoga teacher is to try to be as authentic as I can be and choose to make that inclusivity just threaded through everything that I do.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. It's really refreshing because I don't think we see that, like I said, a lot in a yoga space. And as you mentioned, just for everyone, asana is the physical practice of yoga, but yoga is a philosophy and it's a lifestyle. And in the West, yoga has been diluted to this one element outside of a robust, 8-line path. So just want our listeners to know that. How, I think just as what you're saying, Abiola, is how do you, as you mentioned, really being inclusive, but how do you maintain your authenticity in that when, yoga, and I don't get me started on the path, but it is a very whitewashed, incredibly. And the fact that it took 2020 for a lot of the yoga studios to provide funding for Black, Indigenous, and folks of color is just reprehensible. I'm just going to call that because it took 2020 for this performance. And certainly I'm also a beneficiary of BIPOC scholarship, so I don't want to indict it, but it took the murder of George Floyd for this to open the eyes of these yoga studios, as you mentioned, a practice that has existed for thousands of years that we're not yoga, a lot of yoga studios didn't take that into account. How do you reckon that? How do you make peace with that? Because I have a lot of fire toward that.
Um, Honestly, I think what it is I mean, just that in and of itself, I know I don't look like the Western example of a standard yoga teacher. And that in and of itself, sometimes I feel discounted, like I'm not good enough, I'm not active enough, I'm not worth as much money or as much of, you know, a following. There's some yoga teachers that have so many people who will just like go to any and all their classes. And it took me a really long time to start to see that in my own yoga teacher community. And for a while, I just thought like I just wasn't good enough. And part of it was like, because I'm a new teacher, I'm new to the teaching environment. But part of me thought, well, maybe it's because I don't look like a lot of the students who I end up teaching. Whether or not those are actual thoughts of people who think I'm not good enough or active enough, if they see a curvy, light skinned brown woman and they're like, there's no way that she can do certain poses, whether or not those are actual thoughts of people or if they're my own insecurities, they are a struggle for me sometimes. And I know like before this, like we kind of talked about like my trip that I took in Denmark and kind of pulling from that, being in a culture where it feels a lot more safe to be yourself and that it's not about just the individual person. It's about the community as a whole. It's about everybody's security, everybody's happiness. I'm trying to really re-strengthen my choice to believe the best in people, to choose to believe that their thoughts are kind, that their intentions are kind, and that they wouldn't even remain in my class, let alone keep coming back, unless what I offer them is blessing them somehow. So for me, I choose to offer classes that go beyond just a workout, just a sweat out. Like what I offer, I aim to be as inclusive as I can. So at the end of the day, I really don't worry if my clothes are showing too much, if I look like a whole curvy snack compared to, the other professional yoga teachers and stuff, that my butt and belly and thighs are bigger than other teachers or that my hair is so curly and big. I just choose to show up looking completely authentically me, and being completely me in my classes, goofy jokes and smiles and all. Because I think what it comes down to is by being my authentic self, it helps lower the walls of my students, and that's worth the vulnerability. I think that goes for white and black and brown alike. And especially being somebody who identifies as biracial, having a Nigerian father and a European white mother, I see myself as not even so much of a bridge, but someone who walks across both sides very often and just refuses to be put in a box by either side. And I think that in and of itself, trying to stay out of that box just kind of imparts a blessing or an energy of sorts to enable other people to not only let themselves come out of their own box, but to help enable them to not put others in a box either.
Right. Oh, yeah. How do you try to stay out of that box? Because I think we operate in a society that is very much a dichotomy, that we appreciate binary. It's either this or that. We don't always embrace the complexity and the nuance. So what strategies do you employ to not be forced, especially in a culture that has a history of, as like this one drop rule that, with a society that would label you as Black, but as you're holding space for all of your ethnicity and not having to choose, but to embrace the many facets?
Yeah. I mean, I probably have memories from like kindergarten, as early as kindergarten, if not prior. Just like the struggle back and forth to claim both sides of my heritage. People seeing me in the grocery store with my mom and walking up to her and saying, "How nice of you to adopt that little Black girl." And my mom is like, "Thanks, but I pushed her out of my vagina myself." And yeah, she just like, Susie did not unpump the brakes. She just went for it. It really just came down to just choosing to not back down. Mm-hmm. And even the times where I did back down, to learn how to stand up for myself. Mm-hmm. I will never forget this, because this is how I show myself. Dear White People, season 1, I remember, I can't remember what character it was, but she basically was like, "Girl, you are not Rashida Jones Black, you are Tracy Ellis Ross Black." And I was like,
I remember that.
That is me right there. So even though I am not Rashida Jones Black, I am Tracy Ellis Ross Black, who is like one of the most amazing women ever. And I love her to bits. Like, I get called Bo from Blackish so many times. It's not even funny. And I'm so here for it. Even that character that Tracy Ellis Ross played in Blackish, she's biracial as well. And Tracy Ellis Ross herself is biracial. And so I think at the end of the day, it comes down to knowing that it's not so much a personal thing, people trying to push me one way or the other. It really comes down to people are afraid of what they don't understand, and things that are not in boxes can't really be quantified. And that scares people. The unknown scares people. So I try not to take it personal when people try to force an identity on me one way or the other. And when holding my Black self and my white self offends people, I choose to remember that traumas can come in all shapes and sizes, whether you're white or Black. So however me holding myself might come across to people, especially if it's in a negative way, I just have to remember that it takes all sorts of people to make a world, and all of us have a story that we've had to overcome and come through hardships.
Yeah. Oh, no, definitely. That's your story. Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that. And it's something that you said that I think about previous episodes, that it's a through line, is choosing to vibrate higher and rise above, assuming the worst, which is, it's easy to do in this era, and I think it was recently announced 45 is looking to officially run again, and thinking, this is the world that we operate in that is so political. It's really wonderful to hear choosing to think the best and vibrate higher and rise above that. I think that's something that me personally I have to work much more on. I think a lot of
and I'm working on it as well. This is like me being able to say it after having done some like digging into, the questions that you were so kind to give to me. It's definitely not something that's just there at the surface. And sometimes that takes stopping in the moment, taking a breath. And sometimes it means just absenting myself for a while to be able to collect my thoughts. And also it really has helped being in the 300-hour training that you and I are in with I Am Yoga, and hearing how other Black women have kind of come into a way of thinking that it's not so much that it's forgiving, it's just that it can encompass more polarity, more gray than just being Black and white.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, lessons, it's the journey. And as you said, we're aspiring to it. So we're learning as we go, but we're putting it out there and just being authentic, showing up and saying, this is what we're trying to do. We haven't actualized or attained it because it's going to be our life journey. It's wonderful. You said so much, and I want to backtrack a little bit when you talk about your almost again decade journey. Are there points where especially the goals that you've attained, where you get fixated on a number, like if it's a number of pounds or weight or reps or all of that? Or have you really said, I am just on this journey. I'm not going to stifle myself to these elements? Because I think, especially as women, as our bodies are just commodified and are appreciated for sometimes what they can do as opposed to just being, how do you balance that?
Honestly, it's definitely, this is more of like a very recent development, but I'd say even up to like summer, late summer of this year, I was still very much focused on effort, max reps, personal records, and definitely, what is the number on the scale. And I actually worked for the first time with a really wonderful whole wellness nutritionist by the name of Kelsey Chan. And we just got connected on Instagram very randomly last year, like summer of last year. And so I saw that she offered like a program. And I really was like, even if I'm eating all the right things, I think my mentality and I think my knowledge behind why needs to be kind of taken in hand. And so with working with her, I really learned that like you can eat all the right things, but it's not just about eating like all these organic, fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. It really is about like how you take care of yourself and the manner that you do that. And it got to the point where I felt like I was punishing myself, especially if it was like, I'm eating less calories, but somehow the number doesn't budge on the scale, or, I'm trying to stay in like a maintenance phase and I'm doing all the right things, but then I'm like gaining weight and it makes no sense. And so then I just like plummet inside because I'm like, I can't seem to get where I want to go. But it's also like, well, one, how did God create me? And two, is what I'm doing actually going to get me where he created this body to go? And I definitely believe that I could get to a certain number on the scale, but the thing is that what would it cost me? Would it be something that came naturally? Because there could just be some type of breakthrough, some type of health breakthrough that, as I take, tests and things like that, it will come to me. It could also be that this is how God created me, and I need to find a peace with that and find myself being able to appreciate how I look, not just because, being beautiful in a traditional sense, but it's like just appreciating how I am and what I can do as Abiola. So yeah, I would say lately I really like, I haven't weighed myself in like 4 months. I just refuse to. I haven't even measured myself. I measured myself for a bridesmaid's dress that I had to wear last month. But other than that, like, no, ma'am, I'm just trying to ease on off, not trying to be in that mentality, just taking a break from it, taking a break and just letting myself just exist versus measuring my existence like that.
Yes, because it's an unlearning that we all have to do. Even me professionally as a certified personal trainer, we're indoctrinated with this thought. You think about BMI and all these bias measures that are not predictive of your health outcomes, but that are so, you think about personal trainers and group fitness instructors. If you were to go on the IG, any social media, and it's about the numbers, take pictures, and that's such a wild mentality that we have all consumed. And it's an industry, $1 billion industry that maintains that approach. And what I really am finding as you articulated peace and shifting that it's joyful movement, that it's not physical movement for an outcome, and it's one thing if we're trying to lower like A1C, lipid, like that's fine, but even then it's enjoying the ability to move if we have the ability to move. And so it's such a paradigm shift that we have to unlearn. And I get so frustrated with a lot of my colleagues, trainers that continue to perpetuate this measuring and weights and scale and all of these things that can lead to disordered eating, all of these different body image challenges, because that's the society that we are stewed in versus, as you said, just being and existing, and releasing, because all of that stress can counteract all of the effort, the effort that we're trying to do. So it's an unlearning that we all have to take. Yeah. What excites you about yoga and the trajectory of where it's going as we're seeing yoga teachers like you and practitioners, and we're seeing different bodies and sizes and approaches and energy? What excites you, but then also what are you hoping yoga continues to do so that we don't revisit the past of, and I say through a Western lens, not, the thousands-year-old practice of what it was truly intended, but here in this very Western society?
I'm really excited because, I never really saw teachers who looked like me. I saw one teacher who, she was biracial, but she had a completely different build than me. She looked stronger than me. So, it means the world to me that I get to be a teacher that past Abby would have seen and been like, oh my God, okay, this is awesome. And I'm really thankful to be that person, because I've had women who are not only Black, but white as well, especially curvy women, come up to me and be like, I really appreciate the way that you teach. You made me feel completely enabled, completely powerful to do the flow that you gave us. And that meant the world to me, because especially being a curvy woman, there's nothing like feeling like you are incapable of doing so much in a class where everything is geared towards you being 95 pounds. And if you're not going to hit these postures because the teacher doesn't have enough time to figure out how to teach it to you. I think as we keep moving forward towards being truly inclusive and really open in the global yoga community, I think that there will be more eyes opened and more guards lowered by people who stereotypically have had primary access to yoga. And that will lead to more access being available to those who traditionally haven't had as much access. And I think that hopefully the disparity between these people groups can lessen here in the yoga community. And that will impact the lessening of the disparity between these people groups in the global community as well. And I think that's both what I feel positive about and also what to kind of watch out for.
Yeah. Yeah. What else would you say to an aspiring yoga teacher, a Black yoga teacher, a biracial yoga teacher that's, hearing your amazing story of your, again, 9-year journey, and is saying, wow, after seeing Abiola, oh, I can do this. I can change my reality. What would you say to that person as they embark on a journey? And especially, I think when I started, I did not see, just like you said, teachers that look like me. It was white women, and it totally turned me off.
Honestly, first off, don't conform. Whatever you do, don't conform. And especially for me, identifying as biracial, that goes both ways for me. So whatever a white teacher template looks like or a Black teacher template looks like, just be you. My whole life, I've either been seen as not white enough or not Black enough. in my mannerisms, in my actions, but it only bothered me as long as I let it bother me. So once I like really started embracing my unique blend of self, the things that made me uniquely me and nobody else like me, I saw that there's a power in that rarity if I truly accept it and use it. So don't conform. Don't worry about how others perceive you or want you to be perceived. Just focus on your unique self. Focus on your unique story, your unique journey, and don't worry about the noise. Comparison is the thief of joy, and that is something that really ties into nonconformity. If you allow yourself to be compared to, it's going to lead you to assimilate to that comparison being made about you. So really just like keep on your own path is what I would say.
That's so good. That's so good. Comparison is the thief of joy, and really being you and not having to fit in that box. I really love that. And again, as you're transparently sharing, you're growing up that, folks wanted you to fit in boxes, but you embrace elements of both and just all sides. And that's wonderful.
Well, it's like if you don't have I almost just didn't have a choice because I really didn't fit into a box. I obviously do not look like my blonde hair, blue-eyed mother, but I also do not look like I am half Nigerian. People would try to even say like, oh, are you Latina? Are you this? Are you that? Just anything that could explain this and explain like how I talk. And it just was like, I almost feel like it was a benefit, the fact that I could not really conform to a box. And so it just really forced me to either accept myself or to always just be put down by it.
It's wonderful. This has been great, Abiola. I thank you for having you being here and just sharing your journey, your experience as you're growing and currently, not that you've completely attained it, you're in process as all of us are. It's been beautiful. And I really appreciate your spirit and your energy and sharing. And I know this will be so impactful for our listeners and our audience. What else would you like to say that you haven't shared, that just as we close, just kind of some final words of wisdom?
I would say that especially for people who really want to get into yoga but don't know how, ask people that you trust their judgment. Start small. Don't try to start with like 60-minute, 90-minute classes, especially if you are somebody who identifies as a Jesus follower. Something that I had to learn the hard way is that not everything is going to be for you. So while some people can really embrace yoga, other people find it more of a stumbling block than an enabler, than a help. I think physically yoga is a really great way for both women and men to really find a renaissance of physical health as well as mental, emotional, and spiritual health. But if it's more of a stumbling block for you than anything, then find a different channel. There are so many different ways to move your body. You can take Krav Maga. You could take up marathon walking. You could take up like gymnastics, anything. So I would say for people who get hung up on things, actually learn about yoga and what it encompasses before, writing it off, and just really listen to your inner self, and whatever you feel more at peace about, not fear, not shame, not guilt, but peace, follow that. Don't let something that is in front of you be a hindrance to you trying to get an all around embracing wellness in your life.
Oh, wonderful. Abiola, how can folks find you? I know they're going to want to follow you and just get more of your jewels and your pearls of wisdom. How can they connect with you?
Well, I have Instagram. I also have a TikTok. I'm not very active on it, but I will try to be more in the future. And I also have a YouTube channel that will be having various flows that I make for an app. I'm going to be starting to put my own flows on the YouTube channel. And my Instagram is at Abiola Ogunbekun. And my TikTok is the same, and my YouTube channel is Call Me Abby Yoga. And I also have a website, callmeabby.com. It's a blog/website, but it's more of just a website hosting all of my various services and offerings and things like that.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Abiola, for sharing and just gracing us with your presence. This has been a wonderful episode, and I thank you all for listening to the Black Women's Wellness Podcast. Continue to check out our upcoming bi-weekly episodes, subscribe, follow, and like, and please connect with us on our website, the THEBWWA.com. Leave a comment. We're active on Instagram. We'd love to hear what resonated for you in this episode and what are the strategies that you want to try to employ. Until next time, stay well and remember our wellness is infinite. Take care.